Hey there, Mama, and welcome back to the Mom's Overcoming Overwhelm podcast, episode number 242. I'm Emily McDermott, and I'm here beside you on this journey as we work together to declutter your home, head, and heart. Perhaps you are in the season of life where you are caring for your own children as well as aging parents, or perhaps you are rapidly approaching that season. If so, you are in what is called the sandwich generation, which can be really exhausting, especially if you are in the process of helping your parents downsize or perhaps preparing to have that discussion. So today I'm super excited to bring you my conversation with Grace Rehman. She's a professional organizer who helps women 50 and over work through downsizing, decluttering, and life transitions. She's also the host of the Organize with Grace podcast. And we talk about the best way and time to approach our parents about downsizing and the mistakes that she sees when people approach their parents about it. And also something I learned about called the Antiques Roadshow Fallacy, which means that parents think their stuff is worth a lot more than it actually is, what to do about that, and also some resources to get you started. So again, even if you're not in the sandwich generation right now, but you are approaching it, it is a great conversation to get you thinking about how we can have conversations with our loved ones to prepare and plan for the eventuality that they are going to have to move into likely a smaller space. So without further ado, grab that notebook and pen, and let's dive into today's conversation with Grace Rehman. Hey Mama, are you tired of your cluttered home and mile-long to-do lists but are too overwhelmed to know where to start? Do you lack the time and motivation and don't think you'll ever conquer the clutter? You're in the right place. I'm Emily, wife, boy mom, and declutter coach who has overcome the overwhelm in my own life through decluttering and simplifying. I believe every mom deserves the peace that comes from a clutter-free home. Ready to get your life back? Let's declutter your home, head, and heart together. Hi, Grace. Thanks so much for coming on the Moms Overcoming Overwhelm podcast. I am very excited to chat today.
Hello, Emily. Thank you so much for having me. What an honor. I'm really excited for our chat as well.
Yeah, I have this list of people where I'm like, oh, and all of my copious free time, I'm going to reach out and see if they want to do a podcast swap.
But you
And
know what? It was good. The
yeah.
timing was fine, right? So it's all good. It came together and you've been so patient with, the change that I had to make. So here we are. This is
Here
so
we
cool.
are. And
Yep.
I mean, you have a different focus. You focus on a lot of things in your podcast, but one of the areas where I don't have a lot of expertise, and I'm so excited to chat today, is about this concept of being aware that our older loved ones, like mostly our parents, for a lot of us, we might be needing to think about taking care of them, helping them declutter, and perhaps we aren't in the sandwich generation yet. We're going to be talking about what that is, but just understanding what's to come, how to approach it, how to be able to help them when maybe our parents have very strong opinions about their
Yes.
stuff and their home and all of that. So I'm excited to jump in and would love it if you could start just by introducing yourself, a little about you, your family, how you serve others, and maybe one little thing you like to do for fun.
Definitely, definitely. My name is Grace Rehman, and I started my organizing business, Organize with Grace, while working full time about 6 years ago. And over time, it evolved into helping people declutter, organize, and then now it's the way I handle um, the projects is doing full home clear outs. So this is where the family prepares for the home for sale for various reasons, whether it be to sell it in order to pay for their assisted living expenses or to move into something smaller, more manageable. And I live in California in a little city called Stockton, about, let's see, 45 minutes to an hour south of Sacramento, which is the capital, with my husband and my 7-year-old son, who, he really shapes how I see life in general or time and really what matters at this point, and what I do mainly is I come alongside families, especially adult children, who are helping their parents through a big transition. A lot of times it's the daughter or the son who contacts us in to help with the starting the downsize process for various reasons. And for fun, I love journaling. I can sit all day journaling and reading books. I'm a book lover through and through. So stick me in a corner somewhere, I'll be fine. Just give me a couple of books and something to write with and a journal, and I'm good. So,
Yes. Oh, I am the same. I am definitely the same. And I have started trying to help myself for sleeping purposes and reading like the physical book as opposed to like on my phone or Kindle or whatever.
mhm.
And I have also been reading fiction lately, whereas normally it's nonfiction and it's all like the organizing, decluttering realm. But I have found that I think I'm like a happier person if I read fiction
Oh, fun.
before I go to
Yeah.
bed. So I love that so much. And I just really appreciate because your work is not easy because there's a lot. I mean, normally I would have my sort of normal customer would be a mom with kids similar ages. So my boys are 8 and 9, so similar. And she's just overwhelmed by the playroom or she's overwhelmed by the closets or whatever. And that has its own kind of issues. However, to have, the kids that are reaching out, okay, my parents have decided that they want to stay home. They want to age in place, or they've decided that they want to downsize, or they decided that they, just aren't safe in their home anymore, because that's a huge thing. That's like a lot of emotional disentanglement, I would
Definitely.
say.
That's a
Yeah.
great way to visualize it. Disentanglement, what I thought about as well was layers. There's lots of layers to go, into. And a lot of times we think, well, it's just stuff. I'm just going to tell them to, do this and get rid of that. And I'm like, no, no, no. It's a lot more than that. And so it's really, you're right. It's really touching on so many emotional issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And normally we think about this affecting, although it isn't always, depends on the age of when your parents had you and so forth. But,
Mhm.
and I had kids later in life, but normally,
Same. Yeah.
yeah, could you explain what this sandwich generation means for those that aren't familiar with the term?
Definitely. So the sandwich generation, if you're the daughter who's trying to figure this out, right? You are someone who is caring for your own children, and then you are also beginning to or have been caring for your aging parent. And sometimes this is all happening in one household. So and then you as the daughter or as the son are like just like picturing a sandwich, you're right in the middle. So, your children would be the one piece of the bread, and then, your aging parents would be the other piece, and you're the turkey or the cheese, however you want to be, but you're in the middle. That's the point. But yeah, so the term, the sandwich generation, just real quick, quick history. It was introduced in the social work and gerontology world, the study of aging, which I minored in. Wow, a long time ago, 20 plus years ago, and here we are, right? Full circle. And by Dorothy Miller and Elaine Brody back in 1981. So again, it first started with like, they were referring originally to the younger women in their 30s and 40s who were taking care of their children, but also having to meet the needs of their parents, employers, friends. Now, we're living longer, and, our parents are living longer, we're living longer. So we are being sandwiched with, caring for really one, ourselves, and then our children and, our aging parents. So that's how the sandwich
Mhm.
generation term came about.
Yeah, and you have been doing this a while, and I'm sure that you have seen a lot.
I have.
And I am just curious, like, as far as, okay, so something, maybe it's an event that happens, like
Yes,
there's a fall, okay?
correct,
Somebody
which is
falls.
common,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
it's like a safety concern. It isn't necessarily that the parents proactively decide, like, I think this might be a good time for us to move into assisted living. Like, usually there has to be something that comes before that spurs the action. And then there can be a lot of high emotion because of that safety issue and so forth. And when the son or daughter is like, yeah, we need to do something, like something needs to change, and they start that course of action, like, what are some mistakes that you see about what people do next? Like, when something happens, we need to make a change. We're going to make it. And then they're like, ooh, yeah, like that didn't go right. So, what are some of the mistakes that you've
Yeah.
seen?
So one that I thought about that I found a lot is the because they care, because they want what's best for their parent, they will swoop in and, kind of try to take care of it all. And kind of it really reduces the parent's agency. Yes, they may have fallen. Yes, they may be physically fragile, but they can still make decisions, right? They're still with it as far as making decisions for themselves. So, but they'll, step in and make the decisions, and then they'd feel frustrated when things don't get followed through on, but because of course you're talking about, again, I'm going to try to repeat this because it's not just the stuff, it's their life, it's their memories. And especially it's their sense of control, and that's a really big thing. I mean, if we can imagine ourselves, right? If something happened to us and suddenly we're looking around and people are making decisions for us, it's the same thing, you know what I mean? So yeah, so that would be like the one like common mistake. And then also like looking at an item because we are maybe, the daughter has grown up in that family home, and she's not as attached to the stuff any longer. And it's easy for her to say, you need to get rid of this. Like, what are you doing with this, kind of thing. And the mom or the dad is like, no, this has been part of the, the home for so long, but that abrupt kind of trying to determine what stays and what goes is one common mistake.
Yeah, and what I notice, and I don't have as much experience as you by any stretch of the imagination, but I recently worked with the daughter and then this couple that are in their mid 80s. And it was interesting to me that there was a lot of things that they were keeping that I would call aspirational, like, oh,
Uh-huh.
when I get time to read those catalogs. Like, I haven't looked through the
Yes,
catalogs yet, and yet the catalogs and some of the magazines were like 15 years old.
that's
It's
right.
like, okay, but me being a neutral third party coming in, you always want to approach things delicately, but being like, okay, well, can we have like a time frame, like we keep the catalogs within the last year, but not necessarily like 15 years, because I mean, it's kind of like this thought of like, okay, but if you're 85, do you have the time left in your life that you're going to want to
Yeah,
sit down and read 15 years worth of magazines and catalogs?
right,
But
right.
so have you noticed that in your work as well, that
I
there's a lot
have,
of this like, oh, I have all the time in the world. And it's like, well, no, actually, you kind of don't. And how do you sort of approach
yes.
that with a client?
I have had a real life experience with that a few times, particularly one client who, yes, she had catalogs, she had magazines, she had the newspaper clippings from, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years ago that she had a very tough time letting go of. These things are what she considered sentimental to her. I don't understand it, but I said, okay, we're gonna go with it and try to help you with this. So what we ended up doing was I felt like she needed to be able to see all of it. She has lots of room. I mean, she lives in quite a big home right now, and she's really trying her best to stay in place. But we put it all in one room and let her see, like, is it really realistic? And I've formed quite a relationship with her, and like the rapport where I can say, truly, are you going to have time? Are you going to have time to look at this piece by piece, page by page? And she still has a hard time letting go, but she's been so much, those declutter muscles have strengthened and she's letting go. And she's like, I can't do this without you. I'm like, yes, you can, you can do it on your own. But yes, these papers that we think like we're throwing them out. Like, I mean, this is a no-brainer, but to them, no, absolutely not. It takes some time.
Yeah, and I feel like that sort of generation, and I'm including my dad in this. I'm going to be moving soon back to where my parents are, and I already know a project is going to be his office because he prints everything and he files everything physically. And I'm like, Dad, there's this cool thing called a scanner in like the cloud, you know? But
Yeah.
he's a boomer, I guess, just on the cusp, but he does not, I don't think, trust the cloud. He's like, no, I need to have the physical document. I need to have it printed. I need it here. I know where it is, and this kind of thing. And so I feel like I have seen paper be one of the hugest categories
Yes.
of, and so how just, like this, oh, I need it printed. I need the physical thing. And meanwhile, they're like drowning in paper and files and mail and whatever from however many years ago. Have you had any success sort of approaching that category of stuff in any particular way? Because I will use it with my dad, whatever you say.
Well, let's see. As far as this group is concerned, this just came to me that when I say junk mail, they don't see it as junk mail because it's addressed to them. And I would need to let them know, like, these are advertisements that you don't need to follow through on. These are simply, is this something you need to physically follow through on? And when they say no, it's got to go. And so that's one thing that has worked. Is there anything about this? Does it have a due date? And I mean, you've already, I'm talking to my client, you already have a system with paying your bills and the due dates, you're on time, you've got that down. But the rest of it, it doesn't it doesn't matter. Like, and that takes some time, to let go of. And you can, let's get you a nice shredder, let's just get in there and shred them if they don't trust it. Like, well, what do you mean we have to take it somewhere for them to shred it? Like you said, they don't trust the cloud, they don't tend to. And, the concept is really hard about like recycling and things, but I think keep it simple. That is this something you need to follow through on? If the answer is no, or it's long gone, it's 10 years ago, then it's time for it to go.
Yeah. No,
But
that's
it's
great.
hard. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. It takes time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what you said earlier about like building the rapport, and
Yeah.
sometimes you think as the child, like, well, they're my parent. Like, I don't
Hmm.
necessarily have to do that. However, you haven't necessarily spoken about this before. You haven't been like
Yeah.
questioning them like about their
Yeah.
stuff and why they have what they have. So you kind of still have to approach it delicately and have that rapport building even if you're the kid, I would say
Certainly.
not necessarily just like a neutral third party that's coming in.
Yeah. Yes, you're right, because it can really, without careful ways to approach it, being curious and things like that, it can really sound like, you're kind of putting them on the spot of like, we don't want it to sound like, what's wrong with you? Why are you keeping this? Like, type thing. Because we
Yeah.
wouldn't want that done to us, right? Like, what's wrong with you? Why are you keeping that?
Yeah. Now I want to shift a
So
little
similar
bit,
approach. Sure.
not so much with like aging in place where they're staying in the same home, but if they are actually like downsizing. So they're
Uh-huh.
moving to a smaller home, a smaller space, maybe assisted living, maybe it's just a
Hmm.
smaller home. And they're going through stuff and they're wanting to keep everything and they're really having a hard time parting with their belongings, whether it be furniture because, oh, that's an antique, or perhaps it's a family heirloom, or any of these categories. But you're like, how big that space is that they have to move into, and there's no way that it can be accommodated, especially if the goal is to keep the person safe so they can easily
Yeah.
move around the space. So, how have you, with your clients, or how would you recommend that people kind of approach that conversation of like, yes, you have great wonderful stuff here that has served you in this home, but it is not going to fit in your
Mhm,
next home.
mhm.
Like, how do you kind of help them
Right.
conceptualize that?
Yeah, yeah. And one thing I want to say before, we get into that is that you would be surprised once you get into the conversation with them how ready they are, to sometimes, to let go of things. And but if they're not, yeah, it's really going to have to be a realistic picture and let's draw this out because a lot of times these assisted living homes are able to give you a floor plan, and sometimes it changes because I've been told that like sometimes they change the floor plans completely while it's being built. But for the most part, you know your square footage. You're aware of how much you can bring in there, and that's it. Like measuring out on that piece of paper what can realistically fit. And that's really, I myself and as well as the daughter, the son would have to be kind of not pushy but firm on it. We really have to make some decisions on what can fit into this space because realistically, only say, four pieces of furniture can. But a lot of times, like I said, you would be surprised at what they've already decided. I've spoken with a potential client who became my client. They're like, yeah, that's it. We're just going to bring these two chairs that we sit in comfortably. We know we can't fit that, and so, you would be surprised as you like, just kind of go through it with them, and have that hard conversation. Once you kind of break it open, like I feel like for the most part, like it's all good. You could just continue that conversation of what cannot fit.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's great. And I want to let everyone know Grace is being a rock star because I prepped questions and then I'm totally picking new questions. I'm like, but what about this? What about this?
Yeah,
So
that's okay. We'll
what?
try it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there was one more kind of like specific case I want to get into before we talk about like when we should start these conversations,
Yeah.
and that is the perceived worth of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So we have the parent that is like, oh, well, we need to sell this because this is an antique such and such, or, this is worth a lot. So it needs to be sold. And then meanwhile, the son or daughter who is likely taking work off to be able to help with
Yeah.
all of this stuff, they don't have the time to be selling all of this stuff or finding, an antique shop or, getting an appraiser or any of these types of things. And so, in your experience, like, I'm guessing that you might help them in certain cases find appraisers and such, but do you find that there's some sort of better way to approach that where you have kind
Mhm.
of them butting heads,
Yep.
like the parents like, this is worth something, and I feel like you should try to sell it to an antique dealer. I heard it called
Mhm.
the Antiques Roadshow
Yeah.
fallacy or something, where it's like everyone thinks
Yeah.
their stuff is worth so much. So, what is
Exactly.
your experience and tips around that?
My tip for that is taking them through the process from beginning to end because all they see is, well, I can sell it and that's it. No, no, no. There's other steps involved to get this started. First, number one, yeah, you'll have to find what it is that you're wanting to sell. Number two, you'll have to contact people. Number three, it's like, do you truly have the time and do you have the energy? Because it'll take time, energy, and effort to do this and to kind of help them see that it's not just a one-time shot that this will take. It takes steps, it takes a lot of organization, and when you're, especially in a lot of cases, you're running out of time, and it's really not that it doesn't, again, a lot of these conversations, and we'll get into the conversation part, it takes a few times. It takes several times to, help them understand, the process. So what I focus on is that the steps, the time, the effort, the energy. And do they have it? Do they realistically have it?
Yeah, and then also with the kids, like if they
Mhm.
expect that the son or daughter they're going to be kind of handling everything, and even if you had something like an estate sale or like something that was a lot of coordination, then you
Yeah.
can't expect that someone's going to be able to take a week off of
Right.
work or more to be able to do that. Okay, well, let's
Yeah.
jump into when should we start having these conversations with our parents? Maybe we don't want to wait until somebody falls. Like, we want to make sure
Yeah.
to have it be proactive, but how do we kind of approach that? Because I know my parents, like, they do understand their own mortality, luckily, but I feel like that's pretty uncommon. Most
Hmm.
parents would be like, "Oh, I'm fine. Like, we're managing fine. Our health is okay. Like, why are you talking to me about aging in place or like what I want done with my stuff?" And maybe it makes them uncomfortable. And I would just
Hmm.
love your guidance on like when should we start having
Sure.
these conversations so we don't kind of come up against that time crunch, when everything
Sure.
is like
Sure.
an emergency.
Yeah, yeah. So this is where you kind of become a detective a little bit. Okay. But first of all, it's never too early, never too late, to talk about it. And it will take multiple conversations. But try to, as you're spending time with them, I mean, this might be kind of hard if, you're across the country, but, in your conversations, try to be a detective and be like, what are they bringing up about their home that's hard? What is it that, oh man, this is getting too hard to maintain, and this house is getting too big. I'm tired. And it's a kind of like cluing in on what they are sharing. Of course, it's not going to happen all the time, especially if your parents like they don't want you to worry about them and all of those things. But if you can, because that would be a good jumping point, of the conversation, and say, oh, could you tell me more about like what is it that gives you a hard time? What are you, is it the stairs? Like it's hard, is it hard for you to get up and down the stairs now, with your knees? And so focusing really on like safety and preferences, and especially, I know that this is not the most glamorous thing to talk about, but it's like, it's needed, right? Hey, if dad, if something were to happen to you, would we be able to find the important documents for you? At least let's start there. And most of the time they have not really been, resistive as to like trying to get their papers like, organized. But again, it's every situation is unique, but you just kind of got to find that clue in to the words that they're saying and what they're sharing.
Yeah. And I would say in the case, like you said, if you live across the country and maybe you only see your parents like once or twice a year, but kind of like you said in a detective way, paying attention to how they are moving through the space. Like, do
Yeah,
you even notice that
right.
they're having trouble with the stairs?
Hmm.
Or do you notice that, maybe they have to keep going down in the basement to get something and then it's
Oh,
like kind of,
yeah.
difficult. And so just kind of cluing into that. And then, yeah, I agree. I mean, it's interesting. I feel like parents will use the I don't want to be a bother, but then also something like, well, I don't want to burden you. I don't want to
Hmm.
burden you with this.
Yeah.
Whether it be for my parents, sometimes they have like little health things that come up. I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me? They're like, oh, I didn't want to be a
Mm,
burden.
yeah.
But on the flip side, it's like, well, it would be a burden to me if something happened to you and then I don't know what to do. Or
For
like
sure.
I don't know what your wishes are. Like I don't know
Yes.
if you want to be in assisted living or you want to age in place. Like we need to kind of know some of these things because for me, the worst thing is like guessing
Hmm.
what I think they would have wanted. And when I come on your show and talk about Swedish death cleaning, it's all about that. It's like
Ooh, I
taking
can't wait.
the
Yeah.
decision making out of like what would she have wanted so we
Yeah.
can talk to our parents now while they're sound of mind and hopefully sound of body and then be able to be like, okay, what do you want this to look like? Because then we're giving them that agency that you talked about that is so
Yeah.
important instead of, oh no, mom fell. Okay, this is what we're doing. And then we're
Hmm.
just kind of bulldozing our way in, like you
Correct.
said.
Correct.
Well, I would love the success stories, a couple success stories,
Yes.
and then maybe we can share like some resources or organizations if someone is like, okay, I need help, like I can't do this by myself. But I know you mentioned that sometimes people are more willing than you would think to let go. But if you have any examples of like maybe at the beginning, the child and the parent, they were like really butting heads, but then they were able to really like kind of work through that to come to an outcome that was like, I don't know, good for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. So I helped a couple who, the wife is very independent, and her husband, she had become a caretaker for her husband. And at first, she was kind of resistant to asking for help, although, they had these conversations of like, mom, we need outside, help to, to assist you with because she knew that she wanted to eventually move. They had, a big home, but it took them a while. I mean, they were in that home for a good, I mean, even without children anymore, like they were in that home for 20 years. Their adult children have left. And they wanted to stay in place, and she was really, really, resistive. Like this is their home, they feel comfortable in it. But it did came to a point where, that it was really tough for her to care for her husband because there were like uneven steps, and as beautiful as their house was, like it's up on a hill, but it just wasn't going to work out. And so what happened was the daughter ended up offering to pay for the first package, and because of course, when they come see us, you and I organize like, what, that much, kind of thing. That tends to be the response. Or but when we show them like, hey, this is what we get to do for you, this is how you're going to feel afterwards, we get to be the muscle behind the things that you need to clear out. And so it took her some time to like, I gave her maybe another. Actually, she didn't call me until like a couple of weeks out. And then she finally like, decided. So I felt like despite the resistance, she really took the time, to really look at her situation, and we worked with her, she was what I try to ask in my assessments is that who is the decision maker? And so I think that makes a huge difference because, who's the primary decision maker, and I want to make sure that I go to them, So hopefully that answers a
Mm-hmm.
success story. And what ended up happening was they moved into their smaller home within the timeline that she did, and she had set out, and we helped her with I mean, garage is a big one that's really, really difficult, even for myself, difficult to go through, and then the basement. And she did a good amount of, her own, decluttering. She and her husband, like, hey, do you really need this many pairs of jeans, since we'll be home, right? So they were able to do that on their own, but it was really a great effort to get them to where they, wanted to be. So
Yeah, I
really
hadn't
happy
thought
for them.
much. I hadn't thought much about like the decision maker part, but that is really key because you do have kind of different parties that are involved in all of this.
Yeah.
So that is really smart. And I'm curious, so if someone is listening and thinking, okay, well, I definitely need help with this for my
Mhm.
parents now, or I will in the future. Is there any kind of resource or organizations, or should they just like Google downsizing, or what would you recommend to find people like you and your company that specialize in this sort of thing? Because I think, and I
Yes.
mean, I'm, like I said, my demographic has mostly been different, but I don't think if you just search like professional organizer that that's really what you want. And so I'm
Right.
curious how you would recommend people approach that.
Sure, sure. A great way to get started is, and I have been involved with them, in organization called National Association of Senior and specialty move managers. And so they actually have a listing of, depending on your area, there will be move managers within that area. I mean, it's a growing organization, and they have resources for us senior move managers on how to navigate this with our clients, and that would be a great place to begin. So it's www.nasmm.org, and we could probably put that in the notes, and that's a great place to start. And also, don't be afraid to locate an organizer, because that could be a place to start, to get you started on someone who is objective, someone who is outside. And yes, it's better to get someone who specializes in downsizing, but at the same time, like it's always a great place to start to, get an organizer in and maybe just concentrate on one room. And so it doesn't, because people think that, oh, downsizing, okay, we're gonna have to deal with the whole house. Like, well, not necessarily. If you have time, for that, and if you have time to go through it room by room. And real estate professionals, as well. Like, they will know someone who I've been really trying to get connected with, real estate professionals to say, hey, we exist, and we can help you. We can help you with your clients who need to clear out their homes, and it's a win-win too, because we can get it done faster, and then they can list the home, faster. So, there are resources out there.
Wonderful.
Definitely. And you can contact me.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone near Stockton, Sacramento can work
Yeah,
with Grace.
yeah.
Well,
And
go ahead.
right. Oh, and what I have began to do is I do offer uh like a planning session. You can be in Pennsylvania, and we can talk about like what's the first step? Like, what is it that, can we take a look at what you can do first? Because a lot of times they're like, I don't know what I don't know, and I just need some kind of a plan. And so that's what I help with as well. Like, let's think of a plan, and not necessarily to follow it like, down to the T, but somewhere to start with. So yeah.
That's so helpful because, yes, it is so overwhelming to know something needs to happen and then, like, wait, where do I start?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
will make sure, yeah, to put all that in the show notes so people can
Yeah.
contact you. And go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, can I add another success story? And
Oh,
I'm
please.
hoping that, this will be, something that will work out for your dad as well. Is I had a client who had a very hard time letting go of the catalogs and things like that. Catalogs, magazines. And it, the thing about that is I finally got to kind of the bottom of it. She's like, I've never been taught to throw anything away. And she was part of her parents were experienced the Depression era. And she's was born kind of into that way of, living, and like everything mattered. And so I was just so proud of her to be able to say, I don't need this anymore. And just know that it's possible. They will let go, and just kind of work with them with some patience. And she's, tossing them. She's like, I don't need this anymore.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
it's interesting you say that because my grandmother lived through the Depression and she kept everything. Like even when
Yeah.
she was in a nursing home and they would give her the little containers for pills, like she would be like keeping all of them. And then
Hmm.
my mom would come in and have to like clear things out. But that's interesting that a lot of the clientele now, it may not be that they were alive during the Depression, but their parents were.
Yeah,
And then they learn kind of those habits like through their
correct.
parents. So that's a great point to kind of notice, sort of like, oh, what are some of the generational
Hmm.
aspects and like values and norms that, you kind of have to take into account. So this
Yeah.
has been very helpful, very educational, especially for me as I'm planning
Amazing.
Planning a move, I don't necessarily need help with getting rid of my stuff, but just like that concept of like, oh, what do I do next? Like, what's the next thing? And it can be very overwhelming. So I'm just so thankful that you and your team exist to kind of help people with this sort of thing. And just let us know where people can connect with you if they want to learn more or perhaps work with you.
Yes, definitely. You can come over to my website, organizewithgrace.com. And Emily was so gracious to allow me to, to have a free download for you. And it'll be in the show notes, organizewithgrace.com/start dash here. And it's a great way to it's a simple way to begin if you feel overwhelmed. I call it my 3-room starter kit. So what it consists of, real quick, is let's see, like quick 10 to 20-minute action steps. And I feel like that's once you kind of break the lid open of like, okay, let's get started on one thing. And, and you could pick your living room or your kitchen or even your closet, and it just takes maybe one drawer at a time, one clothing item at a time, and taking quick action on that until you build your declutter muscles and your, downsizing muscles. So
Yay, wonderful. Yeah, I will link that in the show notes. And yes, we are all about the small, sustainable action
yes,
steps over here. So I love that so
yes.
much.
You
Well,
don't have to
thanks.
figure it all out,
I
right?
know.
On one sitting. No way.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in the case of your clients, many of them have been living there for 20, 30 years or more. So you're not gonna clear it all out
No.
in a day. So
Mm-mm.
that's really
No
great.
way.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Grace. This was such a treat to be able to talk to you, and I just really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much, Emily.
Hey, Mama, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, could you please share this episode with another mom who is feeling overwhelmed? Also, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a 5-star written review wherever you listen to your podcast. Finally, if you would like more support, come on over to our free Facebook group, tinyurl.com/moms overcoming overwhelm. Can't wait to connect with you soon.